Good afternoon and welcome to the workshop, Exploring Kenya's Incentives for Green Developers, brought to you by IFC Edge and the EAPI Summit. My name is Kfir Ruzin. I'm the Managing Director of API Events, which is the host of the EAPI Summit, which takes place from next week, Monday to Friday. We hope to see you all there. You can still register online if you visit our website at www.eapisummit.com. You just click register now. You can view the full program over the week. We've got lots of content, lots of networking, and at a very affordable price. So we look forward to having you there. Today's discussion is of vital importance to the future of Kenya's affordable housing program, as well as the adoption of green design in development projects, both in Kenya and across the African continent. I would now like to thank our panel, Dennis Papa Adoni Kwanza, IFC Edge Lead, Ngatia Kirungi, Lead Infrastructure and Finance Advisor, Kenya State Department of Housing and Development, and John Kubai, Immediate Past CEO of the Kenya Building Council. Thank you for organizing today's session on what is a super relevant topic, as well as obviously a very much growing subsector of the real estate industry. On that note, I would like to welcome Dennis, who's the IFC Edge lead and who we are doing this workshop and discussion with, or in partnership with. He'll begin with the presentation, move on to a video, and then we'll lead into the panel discussion, which will unearth a lot of the key topics and key topics around the session proposed. So thank you so much for everyone for joining. And I'll now ask Dennis to switch on your audio and your camera, and we'll touch base with you guys at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kfir. I'll just take some short time to go through a very quick presentation before we start our discussion with our panel. Okay. All right, so first of all, I would want to introduce IFC. IFC is a member of the World Bank Group, and it's focused on solutions for private sector development. And a part of our mission is to create markets that supports climate business. And basically we do this using this approach. It's a four-pronged approach. The first is activating finance through our banking partners, and then support product development such as green mortgages and then green bonds. We also advise and directly invest in the property sector through our own balance sheets. We also incentivize green decision making by fostering an enabling environment of supportive government policies, so that we can help raise the bar on building regulation. And today you realize that is the area that we will be focusing on. The last bit is of the program is helping create a scalable voluntary certification system, and then providing a software to empower property industry and professionals to be able to build green easily. Next slide. So we've been doing a lot of work in this area for the past 5 years. The first country in Africa was South Africa. So far it's the most successful case study for the program that we have in Africa. And I would want to use that to explain what we've done. So when the program started in 2014 in South Africa, in order to address the housing shortage in that country, IFC invested $21 million in a fund that is managed by IHS. So IHS is International Housing Solution. It's a very large equity investor in South Africa's affordable housing segment. Now, they used Edge to find the best solutions that will save energy and then water, given the local climate and the construction practices that they have in South Africa. Now, as a result of this, they were able to minimize their incremental cost from an initial 2 to 6%, and currently it's as low as 0.2 to 0.8% per unit, right? And many of the green measures that they used were centered on simply passive designs or other very sensible measures like low-flow showers. Now, it's very important to note this because a lot of people would think that going green is very expensive because you have to use very sophisticated gadgets to do it, and that it is very impossible for affordable housing to be built green. Now, but then the example of IHS shows us otherwise, and we do have a lot of other examples that we can showcase. Now, IHS compared the performance of their green development against the non-green development that they had, and they found that the green homes created an annual savings on utility bills, which was equal to 1 month's rent. Right, so it made these properties very attractive to buyers and renters. Now we've published these findings in the Housing Finance International Journal, so you can always have access to these things. I mean, to this information. Now, at the same time, IFC created partnership with the Green Building Council of South Africa for technical trainings and market education, including linking all of these agencies to banks and then to the government. The example that we had with IHS inspired other developers to take action. So we currently have Baldwin Properties, which has announced to certify 16,000 units in about 10 projects that they are going to build over the next few years. About 1 million square meters already has been registered by Baldwin. Now, this example goes to showcase the kind of work that IFC is doing in the various countries, how we think all the various partners or stakeholders within the built environment can work together to push the green agenda. Now, IFC has helped investors, developers, and then governments to launch innovative financial products for green building. And you can see a preview here of the case studies along with green construction finance that we've done for commercial, residential, industrial properties. We've done the green mortgages as well, and then the work that we've done in capital markets. The recent example being that of Acorn in Kenya. Now, governments are also launching incentives across this spectrum to catalyze the markets, and we will be talking a lot more about the Kenyan example today. But apart from Kenya, there are a whole lot of other examples around Africa and then outside Africa that we can talk about. So, what exactly can governments do for zero carbon and resilient buildings? IFC has a lot of tools and case studies that we are always happy to show in this space. And we do have free tools that can help you to get there. And on top of that, I mean, on the top of this slide, you can see the technical pathways of what we need to get there. And this applies to both the private and then the public sector action. It's not only the government that needs to take action, but then the private sector also needs to take action. IFC tries to work together with the two and then brings them together. Now, first, we need efficient new buildings. They have an easier time incorporating green elements in their design. It's always easy for you to design with green in mind than wait till the building or the project is ready and then you now have to do retrofit. Now, the second is for the existing buildings, we need to look at what sort of retrofit that we would need to do. Now, this is sometimes a bit more expensive compared to having new buildings right from the scratch. Right. And then the third is we all know even efficient buildings need power. So governments need to catalyze clean energy. Should we look at rooftop or should we look at utility scale? That's something that we need to discuss. And then also we need to know the effects of climate change are already happening. Right. So definitely we will have to look at resilience and then adaptation. Now on the bottom of this slide, you would we are looking for ways that government can act. So the list we have here is not exhaustive, but it represents a starting point for our conversations. We think government can act in the following ways. One, government can introduce a minimum standard of performance through building codes, which Ghana has adopted anyway. government can launch official fiscal, can launch both fiscal and then non-fiscal incentives, right? And we do have some case studies which we'll look at. And then we can also see government creating an enabling environment, particularly needed for clean energy to take off, because we believe that once the enabling environment is created, it would allow private sector to be innovative, to get things going. An example is what the Kenyan government is looking at doing, and we'll be discussing that. Now, finally, we believe that government also have a role in financing. This could be directly, acting as an investor, or enabling aggregation through maybe some country platforms. Now, IFC is willing to work with any government that is looking at developing these actions. We are also very interested in investing in these actions, whether it's investing in a particular city itself or in private sector actors. Right, so that is something that we can also look at, and we do have the tools. So if I should go back, we do have the tools that we can use to work on this. We do have Edge, we do have the Building Resilience Index, and then we now have Apex, which is on a citywide nature. So the great news, as I already mentioned, we do have the tools for action, and I would also want to mention that all the technical and financial details that are needed to make green and resilient buildings already exist. So it is not about we having to create the things from scratch. All of these tools and then the details exist. What we need is the willingness to work together. All the various stakeholders need to come together. If we are willing to come together, we will be able to make this work. Both the policymakers and then the private sector need to find a way to work together so that everything is profitable for all. Now, as I already mentioned, we do have the Edge Green Buildings tool, we do have the Building Resilience Index, and then we do have the Apex Cities tool, which look at action beyond just the building sector. It looks at the city, it looks at transportation, all that. And we also do have the case studies of successful governments action that has released green buildings in their countries. Now, we understand that these initiatives won't happen on their own. They have to be financed, right? So we do have case studies of our financial action. We do have case studies of how our global investors, such as HSBC, the Global Climate Partnership Fund, some regional banks, the very successful one being Bancolombia in Latin America. In Africa, we do have example like APSA in South Africa, who are interested in working with developers to finance some of these projects. Now, IFC is inviting you to partner with us. We provide investments through our cities group. We provide advisory, and then we also work on general market creation programs. So basically, why did IFC create Edge? The main reason was in part to answer the need for a common definition of a green building that would connect all the various stakeholders, investors, developers, buyers, regulators. We all need to speak to the same language. And we see Edge, first of all, to be an international, we define green building, first of all, to be an international green building definition that's agree to a local and international standard, right? And it should be verified by an independent party, right? That is the first one. And then the second condition is it should have a better performance than the local baseline, at least 20% better performance than the local baseline. And the last bit is mainly in order to satisfy green finance requirements. So we expect the project to have an impact, a quantified impact reporting. You should be able to report on individual project basis, and then on the portfolio basis. I should be able to know how much energy and water has been saved, how much GAG emissions has been reduced. Now, why are we so interested in promoting green building? There are a lot of benefits in green buildings. It helps reduce energy consumption. water usage is reduced. There is less materials for construction. There is less CO2 emission. There is less pollutions. When it comes to projects, green buildings attract top tenants and investment. It improves local competitiveness of firms. It also reduces the burden on infrastructure budget that's mainly for government. Now, but one of the things that we've seen is that definitely green buildings are a bit more expensive. But how much more? It's a very big argument. A lot of people simply think it's very, very expensive, about 20 or 30%. But I can tell you from our experience, um, the cost of going green is just around 3%, right? That's if you are using Edge to help certify your project. This is about 3%, and it's also um, you are able to get a 3-year payback for this, right? And for all the various stakeholders, there are a lot of benefits. For it, mainly there is reputational benefit, and then it also helps to align countries' visions to the to the Paris alignment. And then mostly because we are talking about governments today, for government, it helps to position you as a global leader, right? Yeah, you are able to provide more efficient infrastructure. Um, that would help create more competitive businesses. You're able to lower subsidies for utility bills because utility bills will be lower anyway because of the buildings being efficient, and then it also leads to higher disposable income for all residents within the country. Okay, so let me just try and wrap up here. We've done a lot of work and we've published this document. This was done last year. It's a report on finance and then policy blueprint for emerging markets, looking at how government can help create the enabling environment for green buildings. We also do have we also do have the policy pathways for emerging markets, which is also has been released, and it talks broadly about some of the stuff that governments can do to incentivize green buildings. Now, I'll just look at a few of them here. So we do have property. I mean, some of these are physical, and some of them are non-physical. And depending on the context, we would work with a particular country or government to look at which of these policies would work best for them. In other countries, I mean, across Africa, we've seen what they've done. So in Ghana, in a city in Ghana, that's in Takrade, they implemented lower permit fees. So basically, developers that wanted to build green buildings, as far as it's going to be certified, were able to get a discount of 30% on their permit fees. We do have the example of Kenya, which we are going to discuss very soon, saying, I mean, affordable housing must be built green. That should be the baseline. Green bond interest also not taxed. There are other interesting examples from other parts of the world. India looking at extra floor area ratio. We do have the height bonus incentive in Peru, where for projects that are green, they are able to go a bit higher. So if I'm doing 4 floors because it's going to be green, I'm able to get an extra floor for the building. These are incentives that incite a developer to want to act differently, right? And we are hoping that a lot more governments are able to look at that. So this is that of Takrade. We do have that of Kenya over here. So we have all of these examples that IFC is able to share with the teams. Now, one of the questions that we get asked a lot is it possible to actually get affordable housing to be green? Right. Our answer is we are even able to get social housing to be green. And the video that I'll show you now it's going to showcase that. It's a project in South Africa. It's a social housing project in South Africa where government provided land to the developer, right, so that they could build some social housing for residents. They were able to get construction loan from Nedbank, and then they were able to tap into a green fund with a local DFI in South Africa, and this was the result. So can we have the video now, and then we can go to the panel discussion.
When we lived in Elstriver, there was a few problems. The gangsterism is very bad there. The boys there, 9, 8 years old, they're running with guns around. You can't let your kids play outside anymore.
I didn't want my kids to grow up in that environment.
Madulo is a not-for-profit company. I started it in 2005. We're trying to get people out of bad buildings and out of the street into decent accommodation. Inadequate housing brings lots of its own challenges. There's lots of gangs, drugs, alcohol abuse. It's a breeding ground for crime. So we wanted to create hope, and I think housing is one of those things that creates hope. When Madulo started to look at the greening of our projects, it was purely driven from a cost point of view of utilities. How can we get utilities down? So if we talk about electricity or we talk about water, how do we design in such a way that you get a green building? The IFC is an international finance corporation. They designed a tool called EDGE. EDGE stands for Excellence in Design for Greater Efficiencies. EDGE helps developers to think green, but also then to apply it into their design from the onset. Bella Gardens is the first EDGE certified social housing project in South Africa. Our tenants are telling us how much better it is to live there.
For me, it's to have security in your complex. It's most of the best things we experience. My kids can play outside.
The first thing they noticed was the parking, because there wasn't parking in Elstriver that you can take your kids to. Yeah, I'm standing out by the window and I look through the parking, and it's very nice for them.
We strive for something different. And with this, we were privileged enough to get an EDGE certificate. Yes, gives us food, fruit, vegetables, all in there.
For Bella Gardens, we got a reduction in energy. That is because our window-to-wall ratio, the fact that we used heat pumps. Water saving, that's because of the water restrictors that we placed onto all of the taps. People can see the consumption, the education that goes about that. If you know you stay in a place which was designed to be energy efficient, if there's a different mindset there, then you also want to save energy. And what does it mean for me and my family? And then you start to use less water because you also want to contribute to the ethos.
I'm saving maybe around about 1,000 rand every month.
There's a huge difference in that time and now. So now I can go extra with the food. I can buy extra food, I can buy extra clothes, extra shoes for them. There's no more like I don't have now, and I can't do it now.
Knowing that people can save money, it makes me really feel that I'm doing something right, or at least we are doing something right. All we are is a stepping stone. Our objective is to getting you through the journey, giving them that step to the future. With the savings that you can achieve just by following the simple green solutions which we have in place, you will grow and get your own place.
So I applied to move into Bella Gardens early in 2015. At Bella Gardens we saved with rent, we saved with electricity, big time. Big news, we're moving to a bigger house.
When you change people's behavior patterns, you change their lives, not in a small way, but in a big way. And sustainability showed me that there's things better out there than what we used to.
And I think that's the blueprint. The blueprint is that how does it make a community change? How does it make children look different at the place where they're staying? We can do this again. We've got a blueprint that we can do again and that we should do again.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that helps you see that we are not only talking about theories here, but then we do have practical examples on the ground. These are social housing, even cheaper than affordable housing that has been able to be built green. Now, let's go into our panel. And before I invite John and then Ngatia to come on, I just want to provide the background to the workshop today. And mainly, we are exploring Kenya's incentives for green developers with IFCH. Now, on the 7th of July 2020, Kenya issued a decree that all affordable housing development projects under the nation's Big Four agenda must meet the EDGE Green Building Standard. Now, the government will provide developers with land to build affordable housing projects that meet the government's commitment to resource-efficient structures. The decree was officially announced at a virtual press conference on the 7th of July 2020 by Kenya State Department of Housing and Urban Development, represented by the Honorable Principal Secretary Charles Henga. Also in attendance were the reps of the UN Habitat, the Nairobi Stock Exchange, the Kenyan Green Building Council, and then the IFC, Kenya Country Manager. As in many nations in Africa, the government of Kenya has placed a strong emphasis on meeting the demand for affordable housing. President Uhuru Kenyatta has included affordable housing as one of his Big Four agenda deliverables. The ambition is to close the housing gap for Kenyan citizens while doing so in an environmentally responsible way. Kenya's State Department of Housing has already created an MOU with the county governments for affordable housing projects. In the MOUs, developers who win bids for projects can receive free land and build upon it for the purposes of affordable housing projects. That is, if they design and construct these buildings in accordance to the EDGE standard. According to the World Bank, 200,000 housing units are needed annually in Kenya, but the supply is only 50,000 units. So this has resulted in cumulative housing deficit of 2 million units, with more than 60% of urban households living in slums. Now, by incorporating the EDGE standard into its affordable housing requirements, Kenya has taken the first steps towards ensuring a better future for its people. Now, I would invite Ngatia Kurungi and then John Kabwe to join me on the panel. Hello, Ngatia. Hello, John.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So we will take the time to discuss what I've just read, to discuss the decree. Let's see what our participant audience also have, what other questions they have, and then we can wrap up. But before we do that, I would allow you to introduce yourselves. First, we can start with Ngatia, and then John can also come in.
Thank you very much. My name is Gatia Kirongie, and I am the lead housing infrastructure and finance advisor to the State Department of Housing, which is the department within the national government, Kenya's national government, that is responsible for the affordable housing program under the Big Four agenda, with the intention to deliver or to develop over 500,000 units of affordable housing, which you have mentioned. We would want to all be at least EDGE certified as we look to achieve social and environmental responsible development for our people.
Thank you. Hello, John.
Hello, Dennis. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you too?
Good, great. So my name is John Kabwe. I'm the founder and chief technical advisor for Basic Group Limited, which is essentially a professional services consultancy. And prior to that, I was the immediate past chief executive officer of the Kenya Green Building Society, the organization which worked closely with the State Department in ensuring that we have this decree for making sure that the affordable housing is beyond affordable, but it's also sustainable. So by profession, I am a building surveyor and a sustainability consultant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introductions, Ngatia and then John. So, Ngatia, I'll start with you. What exactly is the strategy that the State Department for Housing and Development is going to use to tackle affordable housing in Kenya?
Thanks, Dennis. I think I saw on the program that the PS of Housing, Mr. Charles Hinga, will be speaking at the EAPI itself next week. And so you'll hear a lot more from him. But from me, I guess I can just summarize that the strategy is a multi-pronged approach. And in terms of what government is bringing to the table, the first thing is the provision of land where it's available. And this is both on the national government level, so national land owned by national government, as well as that owned by the county government. You mentioned that we have entered into numerous MOUs with numerous counties who are all looking as well to provide their land into the affordable housing program for qualified developers to then now build upon that. So depending on the availability of land, the national government is very keen to provide that to developers. The second element of the strategy is the provision of bulk infrastructure. This is primarily the horizontal infrastructure that's required to make any development viable. In the past, you have seen that developers have been required or have had to put up their own sewage treatment plants, have had to cover the cost of road construction and the provision of power out of their own pocket. And what that has done is that it has increased the overall cost of a development that has to be recovered via higher prices to the end buyers. Now, government is very keen that where a project has been approved, we would provide the infrastructure required and thereby reducing that cost pressure on development. Next, and I think the most important thing, one of the most important elements is demand aggregation. Now, we often hear that property development is not just about building. In fact, probably that's a secondary element. Property development really is about offtake. It's about sales. Are you able to sell what you have built? That is probably the number one reason why we have historically not seen sufficient supply of affordable housing in the past. And what we have done as government is that we're looking to aggregate demand through a affordable housing portal called Boma Yangu, which is where currently over 320,000 Kenyans have registered for the affordable housing program. Of those 320,000, about 10%, so about 32,000 of them are contributing actively. In the portal, you can save anything from $1 all the way to the amount you would like. And right now we have over 1 billion shillings that has been contributed by these contributors thus far. And what we're doing is we're offering developers access to this portal so that they can actually show their projects to these 320,000 registered Kenyans. And once their projects are live, the general public is then able to then select a particular project and units in that particular project as well. And so we act almost like a turbocharged sales channel. From the developer side, going back, we also are providing various tax incentives. I think the most powerful of which is the VAT exemptions. VAT in Kenya is 16%, and so exempting that from the cost of a development has a significant effect on the overall construction costs as a whole. So we have had a lot of success with this. We have operationalized the tax exemption process. In the past, we had tax exemptions and tax incentives that were in place, but were never taken advantage of. And what happens is that if you go through a full financial year, the National Treasury are within their right to look at the utilization of these incentives and decide to roll them back if they're not being seen as being effective or being useful. So it's been a big success that we've been able to take 4 developers through this process and have their projects fully tax exempt, at least VAT tax exempt on their inputs. And finally, a big concern we had from developers is the length of time it takes to get approvals done. And so we're looking to fast track approvals. And in the past, this hadn't been tested. But what we have been able to prove with one of the projects we are doing in Nakuru County right now is that the approval process can happen fairly quickly. In fact, with that particular project, we got all approvals within a span of 3 days. And so, and that is really working very closely with the county governments. And it's something that we hope to be able to replicate across the country. Thank you.
Great. So just following up on that, this decree that was enacted last year in July, what exactly does the State Department for Housing and Development want to achieve with this decree? And then also, it would be interesting to know what led to the realization that it was necessary to incentivize developers to make affordable housing green.
Well, the affordable housing program in itself it's a very large and transformational initiative, and the State Department of Housing is very cognizant of the importance of having long-term sustainable developments with both the environmental and social considerations in place, not as nice to haves really, but as must have. And that's how we can ensure that we don't build ghettos that don't stand the test of time. So we want to ensure that our developments, or the developments that we approve, contribute positively to the local environments they are in, and factor in the many green features that actually help reduce the cost of ongoing operations of the development, and hence make them much more affordable. You mentioned we saw in the video the whole element of green buildings and the lower utility costs that result from that. That's very important. We don't see affordability just simply as at the point of purchase, but also in the ongoing utilization of the development. So though we do recognize, and you had also stated this, that green developments can be slightly more costly at the construction stage, we do hope that the additional costs are able to be mitigated through the incentives that I mentioned, the incentives that we're providing, and that these incentives are sufficient for developers to commit to these green standards while still maintaining their desired profitability.
Great. Okay. John, I just want to come to you. I mean, how exactly was KGBS involved in this whole process? Because I know very well that you were the main organization that was pushing this, and you played a very key role. It would be great to let all of us know. I mean, what led to this? How you guys were able to push this? Was it a very straightforward process dealing with the State Department to get this decree to be enacted?
Thank you, Dennis. And I think I'm happy to be here talking about how the Kenya Affordable Housing Program is actually becoming not just affordable, but also sustainable. As most of you all know, is the Kenya Green Building Society is a voluntary membership-based organization with a mission to transform the built environment towards sustainability. And through that, we look at setting the standards through certification. We look at advocacy, that is advocating or pushing hard for any piece of legislation that we believe will help us to transition towards a more sustainable built environment. And of course, creating awareness and training developers and all major stakeholders within the built environment space to have the necessary skills to be able to deliver sustainable projects. And that is something that we have been doing as the Kenya Green Building Society over the past now 10 years. And for myself as the head of advocacy, once upon a time, and the chief executive, we tried to make sure that we work with the government to see that all future developments at least are more sustainable. We've been involved with the government back in 2017, where we were working with them with the medium-term plan 3 to make sure that green building is actually integrated in the Vision 2030, and specifically the medium-term plan 3 moving forward. And we've also worked closely with the government when they were launching the Kenya Building Research Center strategic plan that was in 2018 to 2023, where one of the key areas of emphasis was green building. So we've come a long way with the government, working closely towards making sure that the built environment is actually sustainable. We are happy to say that the government has actually been very receptive of greening the built environment, because that was also part of their plan, and especially the current government, because they wanted to do something a bit different. So they were open to good ideas, and that's how we were able to work closely with them. So specifically on the affordable housing, once the Big Four agenda was actually launched by His Excellency the President, and affordable housing was one of the 4 pillars. The Kenya Green Building Society, of course, reached out to the State Department and laid the emphasis that I think it's a good opportunity, because this is actually going to be a landmark project, because as we know, housing is the backbone of any piece of infrastructure that develops our cities, because it meets the basic needs, and that's housing and shelter. So as a backbone infrastructure towards development of our cities, we felt like we can't miss out on this opportunity to work closely with the government to make sure that the affordable housing program is not just affordable, but sustainable. And sustainability, of course, also makes development more affordable across the entire life cycle of a building. And I think that's something which especially developers need to take advantage of, because that can also be a very unique selling point, especially to homeowners, because most of them, when they come in, they are looking for affordability, not just at the point of accessing a house, but also how they live that particular life. And just like the way you demonstrated with that particular example, is that they enjoy lower operational costs, and such kind of money they can be able to use it to buy clothes or buy stuff for their children. And for that, the government was agreeable to the whole idea that affordable housing is not just affordable at the go, but also it has to be sustainable. And that's how conversations between the Kenya Green Building Society and the State Department reached a point where they matured, of course, in making sure that affordable housing is actually sustainable. And then the question will be, why IFC standard?
Yeah, exactly. I was even coming to that.
I know you were that's the next question.
Yeah.
And what I can say about EDGE and why we settled on EDGE is the fact that the IFC tool, as we know it, is 3 things. It's a standard, it's a certification, and it's also a benchmark on exactly what is sustainable. And it makes plenty of sense, especially for the emerging economies, because it's also easy to know, and especially now this is for the developers, it's even easy to know whether your building is actually green or not, even before you actually commit funds to developing that project. It also helps you to eliminate the mistakes that you could have made to make your buildings actually more expensive. And then you say that green buildings are expensive. And I think that's something which at times never seems to go away, that green buildings are expensive. And what I can actually say is there are green buildings which are expensive. But then that's the reason why those green buildings which are expensive, when we come to certifying buildings, you'll find them that they're certified at the highest level. And you'll say that there are numerous levels when it comes to certification of buildings. But for the affordable housing program, the government said, we will go with the EDGE minimum standard, and that's 20% improvement in energy, 20% improvement in water, and also 20% improvement in embodied carbon in materials. That's what they said. So that minimum standard will actually add no significant cost. All you just need a good professional team on your development team, and they can be able to steer that project and make sure that they are very conscious that the cost isn't high, because if it's high, it is not sustainable. And that being the case, and the government knowing that too well, and led by Honorable Charles Singer, the Principal Secretary, who is actually very conversant with issues to do with renewable energy and green development based on his knowledge in South Africa. I think it was something which was reasonable to them as the State Department and as government, and that's why they accepted to say that let EDGE be the minimum standard for the affordable housing program. Thank you.
Okay, great, John. So coming back to Ngatia, I mean, what I want to know is, has there been any steps taken so far to operationalize this decree? And if there has, what has been in the setback? And how has it been handled? Has it been smooth? Has the industry been happy about it? I mean, it will be great to know what the feedback is.
Sure. I would say that, first of all, the feedback has been very positive from private sector developers. The question has always been, so how do we, and I speak on behalf of the developers, how do private developers access all these incentives and take advantage of the decree? In the case of the land, it's important to note that this is public land, the land that the government would be offering out. And the rules on allocating public land to private sector players are very clear, and would have to go through a very strict public procurement process. And I'm happy to report we have not had any problems with that. In fact, the first pilot project in the affordable housing program was undertaken on that basis. And this was a Park Road project. It was a Park Road project, which was on an infill site, and we have been able to construct 1,300 units on that particular site. And now we're looking to provide even larger tracts of land in the outskirts of Nairobi for the same purpose, for now mega or much larger affordable housing projects. And I'll talk about one of them shortly. I think in terms of setbacks, the setbacks hasn't really been on the policy itself. The setback that we often see is more in terms of delays in private sector developers achieving financial close. So these incentives are only, we're only able to engage with a developer once we have assessed their project, we have done the due diligence on the developer, and we are sure that they are, on the last steps before breaking ground. As you can imagine, since the program was launched, we have engaged with hundreds of developers, and many of them have been in, often in different stages of readiness. It's very clear from policy and in fact from law that these incentives and this decree as well can only be effected, or can only be is only applicable to serious developers who have already got their financing in place, who have got their projects approved, and who are ready to go. So if there's been one setback, it's that we haven't had enough of those. Yeah, we've had plenty of developers who are probably one or two steps before that stage, and we're doing everything we can to work with their financiers, to work with, like I mentioned, with county approvers and the likes, to get them to the point where now they can now qualify for these incentives and on this decree.
Okay, so I'll come back to you soon, but then John, is the KGBS working with these developers as well to help them to take advantage of this decree? Because from what Ngatia is saying, there seems to be some setbacks, mainly in terms of financing. But then apart from financing, we know very well that once your project is certified green, it opens up a lot of financial options to you, funding options to you. So is the KGBS working with these developers to get them to certify their projects quickly at the design stage, so they can use that to help get funding before they can have access to the land and then the incentives that the government is providing?
Right. Thank you, Dennis, for that question. And what I can say is the Kenya Green Building Society has always remained true to its word around awareness and education. So one of the things that the Kenya Green Building Society, which it continuously does, is the creation of awareness, and especially awareness around the EDGE program, as well as training towards training and making sure that more developers, more professionals are well skilled to be able to deliver programs or projects to become green. So that is still ongoing, and part of what we've done is that the Kenya Green Building Society, through collaborations with the Kenya Property Developers Association, we are reaching out to developers to encourage them that actually developing towards green is not expensive. We've even come up with a few programs where we help developers to share some of their designs, and then the Kenya Green Building Society can be able to connect them with some professionals, especially edge experts, who can be able to help them and let them know that actually your projects probably maybe need a bit of tweaks here and there to be able to reach green, or probably maybe you need to do a little bit more. So you get some preliminary advice, which at least now can be able to help you and also connect you with a professional who can be able to be part of the team, a team that can be able to develop a building sustainably. So the Kenya Green Building Society, in its role as the umbrella body trying to transform the built environment, is actively doing that. And we are encouraging more and more developers to reach out to the Kenya Green Building Society for that particular guidance, just in case they weren't aware, or let's say they were not very clear on what are the necessary steps to take. We can be able to do so. And the Kenya Green Building Society also, with the State Department, we work closely with the State Department, and we try to hear from the State Department to know if there are any developers who are having challenges meeting that minimum requirements, or maybe something is not clear, to help them clarify that. Number two, what we are doing with at the Kenya Green Building Society is to also understand the pipeline of projects which are coming up, and that is also to entice or interest the funders, for example, like the banks or the financial institutions who want to provide funding, that there is a big pipeline of projects which want to be green. We've done that before back in 2018, and we came up with a pipeline of around projects worth $250 million. We did that again, I think in 2019. 2020 we didn't do that, but in 2019 it had reached to around 450. So you can see that there is progress. And with that, we were able to tell the financial institutions that you need to come up with green finance, and on the flip side also, you need to come up with financing for the developments which will come up, because if a development has to be green and it is certified, you hadn't got yet told that you need off-takers, you need sales. So you can't have sales when you don't have mortgages. So we are talking to banking institutions also to see how they can come up with products like green mortgages, so that once you have green finance on the one side, you also have green mortgages which can also be able to offtake or make sure that at least once developments are there, there's some mortgages, and developers can actually be able to develop some more, because there'll be off-takers who are able to take up those properties. That is something which the Kenya Green Building Society is currently and continuously doing, and we hope developers can be able to take advantage of these opportunities, so that they can be able to be part of this affordable housing program or any other development program that necessitates green finance and development of green buildings. Thank you.
Great. Now, so I mean, if we have any developers listening to us, from what Nkatia is saying, the decree wasn't a joke. It is actually true. If you are, I mean, if you have the financial resources, you are ready to go. You can go through the process. There's a strict public procurement that would be done, and if you meet all of these conditions, you would be able to get these lands. Now, we do have a few questions from our audience, and then I would want to read out just one of them. So this is a question saying that with the projects that have been done, I mean, was any of them sustainable? I mean, was it based on any green certification? I think this is coming from Siddhartha. I hope I pronounced the name right. But then he's asking if any of the affordable housing projects that Nkatia mentioned, especially the Park Road project, was it certified? Was it a green project?
So I can answer that. So the Park Road project wasn't certified, but it did have many of the elements that would have allowed it to become to have been certified. Everything from the window wall ratios and the use of light and the various factors that the various elements that would have allowed it to have been certified. However, when it comes to projects we have approved, then yes, most of them are already well on their way to being certified, if not certified already. And that's why we're saying we're working very closely with the Kenya Green Building Society to achieve now 100% compliance on this decree.
Okay, great. There was another question from Catherine asking if these projects are completed. If they've been completed, and what's the feedback from buyers and tenants are with regards to the savings. But I guess the projects haven't been completed yet, so it's premature for us to know what these savings are. However, if these projects are going to be certified with EDGE, at the certification stage, at that design stage, you are able to estimate what the savings on utilities are going to be. So it's one thing there, and it helps these developers to be able to market their projects to buyers and then prospective tenants, that if you are coming to buy from me, this is how much you're going to save in terms of energy and utilities. Yeah, great. Okay, so let's go on now. My other question to Nkatia is, apart from the projects that you've mentioned, right? Have you had some other developers coming to you requesting for this land? Because I know how it seems. Once you mention free land, every developer would want to test it. They want to come to you asking that, okay, the decree says free land. I'm coming for a free land. I'm willing to build green. Have you had these kind of issues?
Yeah, so maybe I can talk about first. Maybe we can put them into two categories. In most cases, the land that is available is limited, and so you obviously would have more demand for the land than is available. In that situation, that's now where the public procurement rules come in place, and that typically would entail a call for proposal from developers, then evaluation of those development proposals, shortlisting and prioritization, award, then finally contract finalization, site handover, groundbreaking, the usual that we know of. But we have a unique situation right now within government, where the government has actually made available over 4,000 acres. Actually, it's 4,262 acres in an area of Nairobi called Athi River. So now in this situation, and it's a very it's a growing area. It has a lot of activity, both commercial and residential. And in this case, 4,200 acres is a lot. So this is a situation where now we probably have more land than we have demand. So in that case, we are not as we won't go through exactly the same situation as we did in where you have 5 acres or 2 acres in an infill site. Now we have instead of awarding to 1 or 2 developers, we can simply award to all developers for as long as their projects make sense. If I can talk about this Athi River development, it's called Athi Smart City. I mentioned it's in the Athi River area. It's 4,262 acres. But the first phase that we're looking to undertake is 200 acres. And in this case, this land again would be provided free of charge to developers. And the proposal is envisioned, the proposed development is envisioned to be a competitive smart city. So using green and new technology, in an area that is going to benefit really from the rapid rate of urbanization around it in the Nairobi metropolitan region. Beyond that, there is also a lot of major infrastructure that is within the same vicinity. That includes the standard and meter gauge railway. We have the airport, which is not too far from there, and it's actually on the Nairobi-Mombasa Highway. We have already developed a land use plan together with the key stakeholders. This is the county governments of Machakos and the lead agencies such as the water agencies, environmental agencies, road agencies, and the likes. And as government, our objectives are very broad, but I can summarize them simply by saying, first, we want to develop efficient infrastructure and services that will spur the development of this smart city. We want to promote the private sector development of attractive and functional housing to be able to nurture livable, sustainable urban communities, and to promote vibrant urban economic development for the empowerment and wealth creation in the region. We know that affordable housing specifically, but even just housing in general, creates a lot of jobs in the delivery of the same. So we are very keen to build up the employment and economic profile of the regions of this region, as well as all regions in which we are operating in, and really to harness scarce national resources and conserve the environment. It's very important. That area can be particularly dry, so we take these environmental considerations, use of water, and in the designs and the likes and management of the developments very seriously. So this is an opportunity that will shortly be available to the development community, both local and international. And we're just on the final stages of just ticking all the boxes with all the stakeholders, including the Kenya Property Developers Association, just to ensure that we are all in line with what we're trying to achieve.
Great stuff. Now, John, let me come to you. What do you think is needed to make this decree to be successfully implemented? Are there issues that you have noticed that you would want to bring to the attention of the State Department?
I think Gatia has really said it all. What are the challenges that we've been able to experience to see that this decree is actually implemented to its fullest? But what I can say is that we are still in its early days. I cannot say that really there's been a failure in the full implementation of the decree. And based on the 4,000 plus acres of land that they've spoken about, there is a lot of our sustainability elements which are actually emphasized and will be earmarked for those particular developments. And I know that the building blocks, and that is the affordable housing which will be there, will definitely be meeting these minimum green building standards. I believe that we are still on track. It's still early days to say that it hasn't been successfully implemented. Yes, it has. What I can say about Park Road, as much as Park Road wasn't certified, but at least in the initial designs, and they did consider green elements, because the Kenya Green Building Society had worked closely with the State Department to set up a prototype of what exactly a green building actually is. And a lot of those design elements, especially the passive design elements, were borrowed from that prototype, and other designs were actually come up with. So we feel like, at least with that, as much as there is no benchmark which was that be done, it will be at the government's liberty to see whether they would like to do a benchmark or not. But I think it's a good idea. But moving forward, I feel like the opportunity is still there. We can get more and more sustainable developments. And as Gatia has actually even said, is that at the river, the region is actually a water scarce. And if that's the case, most of these green features, especially around water, that is making sure that you use water efficient fixtures, making sure that you recycle your water. I think they will be in full play at the river, and we are counting on that. And with that, we feel like green building, at least, or IFC minimum standards, can be able to be enforced or emphasized in that particular area. The only one thing maybe which I could talk about, I think, will be financing, to see that there is more green finance, especially for certification, because as much as we want the developments to meet the minimum standards, we also want them at least to be certified, because certification at least sets a mark, and it's also beneficial to the developers, because that certification can help them to market their products properly. All they need to do is just get the right marketing team or communications team, and they'll be able to actually do their sales well. So all I can say is that it's still early days. We believe that we'll be seeing more and more buildings meeting this particular standard. Thank you.
Great. So a lot of work needs to be done to ensure that this is, very successful. Now, I have another question from the audience. I think this question will go to Katia. She's asking, would there be a policy to cement this decree to institutionalize the requirements? Right. So, is it going to remain just a decree, or we would want to go ahead to, put in place a policy that would make sure that, irrespective of whichever government that comes in, this becomes something that Kenya is committed to? I don't know if Katia or John would want to attempt that.
I will also
Absolutely.
attempt to get you. Okay.
Absolutely.
But you can go ahead first.
The requirements for the projects that we're looking at, including EDGE certification, are included within what we're calling the development framework guidelines. This is actually the guiding document for the affordable housing program, and that's not something that is going to change based on a different administration that comes in or otherwise. So that document has been approved by our cabinet, and okay. is what we're using as the basis for the evaluations that we're making on all these projects. So this decree does have a lot of staying power for as long as two things are in place. For as long as the incentives are being utilized, then it's easy for us to argue about their effectiveness, and hence they won't be rolled back by government. But if they're not utilized, then you can understand why they could be seen as ineffective, and then in subsequent financial years they could be rolled back. The second thing is just the availability of land. Government doesn't hold as much land as many people would think, especially in urban areas. It's primarily held by private sector developers or private sector landowners. And so what we're trying to ensure, and what we are actually doing, is ensuring that these incentives are also applicable to private developments, to developments on private land, other than the provision of land, for example. So when we're talking about the tax incentives, that applies to both government projects on government land as well as on private land. We're talking about access to the Boma Yangu portal, which is the aggregator. That's, if you go on the portal right now, you will see that there are probably more private projects there than they are public. So that just goes to show that this decree and many of the elements within the development framework guidelines have a lot of staying power beyond the next 18 or so months before we get into the next administration, for example.
Okay, John, would you want to say something before I come in?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Ngatia has said around the development controls that they're putting up in place for the projects. And on the flip side, and which is an ongoing activity, is that the Kenya government is coming up with the national building regulations. That's the building code. The Kenya Green Building Society was a key stakeholder as one of the contributors towards the Green Building Code. And among our contributions were the minimum standards for what should be really decent accommodation or decent housing or decent development in Kenya. And when you look at that, most of the minimum requirements for this EDGE standard were actually captured in the building code. So what we are saying is that right now development still has to go on while the building code is actually enacted. So that's where the decree comes in, so that it sets the standard so that we don't bake in inefficiencies at an early stage, because the affordable program has to roll out regardless of whether the building code will actually come in place or not, or when it will ever come in. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. But still, we have the building code, which actually captures what's there in the minimum standard. But the beauty will be that if you build to the EDGE standard and you market yourself as an EDGE certified building, there are some market benefits which will accrue to that, because the market is fully aware and knowledgeable about the minimum standards. And that's what they will want to buy, a development which is actually certified to that particular standard, because they know the benefits that come with that. So just beyond meeting the minimum standards, which is ongoing, it will be also an added advantage, at least to see that you meet the EDGE standard. But once you meet the building code standard, you'll still be able to meet the EDGE standard as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Now, I think John mentioned in his discussion that, I mean, as far as there are more lands, there will still be this incentive in place. Now, do you have any plans of extending this to private owned land? Because, like you mentioned, government land wouldn't. I mean, it's not infinite. It would get finished. I mean, at a point in time. But is it possible if private sector players have their own land that they want to use for the affordable housing program, what can be put in place for them? Is it possible for them to also have access to this infrastructure development you're talking about? Can they also have access to the 16% VAT that's they'll be exempted from? I mean, are there plans like that in place?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, the majority of the 500,000 homes will be built on private land.
Okay.
And so these incentives apply to private landholders and private developers, definitely. The only incentive that doesn't, I mean, by virtue of it being, just by definition, it's on private land, means that we can't provide public land. Yeah. But everything else is applicable for a private land developer as well, including the bulk infrastructure.
Okay, great. Now I think we just have about 5 minutes to wrap up. So let me just get my last questions out, and then we can just conclude. Now, for Ingatia, what sort of support do you think you would need from stakeholders like IFC, KGBS, John and his team? We also have the Kenyan Property Developers Association. We have the Architectural Association of Kenya. There are a whole lot of built environment players that really have a role to play in this. What kind of support do you think you need from these guys to ensure that this becomes a very successful program? And then in the next few years, we see that there are a lot more green and affordable housing projects actually being built and then occupied in Kenya.
Sure, I think two things. First is the built environment professionals and these bodies that you mentioned are all very familiar with the affordable housing program and what we are looking for. So what I would implore all developers, or maybe I should be imploring these associations and these organizations, is to work more closely with private sector developers prior to them making their submissions, or as they're thinking about the projects that they would want to contribute into the program. That way, by the time they're coming to us, most of these boxes are ticked. We spend a lot of time with basically educational efforts with private developers, and we would love to have greater support from the likes of KPDA, who have been amazing. I can tell you they have been really helpful in this process, as well as the Kenya Green Building Society, and we get a lot of we spend a lot of time with the likes of AAK. So if we could have everyone a little bit more proactive and have the developers go to these organizations for guidance, that's going to help everybody. But we would also like to hear more feedback and get greater idea generation from these organizations as well. and they can be a good source of, pooling that kind of information to the affordable housing program. Would love to know what we're doing right. Would love to know what we're doing wrong, and what works for the market and what doesn't. We're very clear that we as government, or as as a state department, we could have missed some things that are critical to developers. And the good thing about where we sit right now is, given the fact that affordable housing is within the Big Four agenda, we have a lot of support around ensuring that affordable housing is a viable initiative for the private sector. So hearing back from these organizations and these parties would be extremely helpful as well.
Great. So some feedback from the stakeholders would be very helpful. John, so one last, is this decree alone enough to spare on, green affordable housing in Kenya? Or do you think there's something else that needs to be done?
I think the decree itself is not enough, and there's a lot going on also in the country as far as going towards a sustainable built environment is concerned. A lot of it is actually happening globally, and Kenya as a country is also sort of like aligning itself to that. For instance, like Kenya just recently improved its national determined contributions on climate change, and previously to that, Kenya never looked at the built environment towards contributing when it came to climate change. But in the new submission that's in place, the Kenya government is also, through the Ministry of Environment, coming up with extended producer responsibility regulations, or laws which are transitioning the built environment to manage waste or materials within the built environment towards a more circular way. And what I understand also, this is being done in collaboration between the Ministry of Environment and the State Department of Housing, and also the State Department of Public Works. So I think when you start to look at all these pieces of legislations which are coming together, you see that, okay, the decree by itself will not be enough, but there'll be a lot of push coming in from other pieces of legislation, which will necessitate developers to also say that we need to build green. I think it's also about time that the developer community asks questions and tries to see where can they see the economic sense when they build green, and that information is readily available. But the more bespoke information lies when you have the right professional team. Make sure that you have the right professional team, because they will understand the circumstances of your location, the circumstances of what you're trying to build, and of course the circumstances of your return on investments. That way they can be able to come up with a green development that can be able to meet all that. So as much as we're talking about the decree by itself, I think it's a good step. The government has actually done fantastic. We really can't ask for more. So now we just want to see that also the developer community, the financial institutions also play along, so that they make, for example, financial products are readily available for the developers, so that they can be able to also develop green. And we also hope that the respective counties as well can be able to fast track the approvals. For example, like the example Gatia gave us with Nakuru, 3 days. Now that's fantastic. And those are some of the incentives that we'd like to see, because that sometimes tends to be the make or break for most of these developers. So if we can have all these counties which have actually signed MOUs with the State Department actually playing along and making sure some of these incentives are available, I think we'll see that being a reality. And that's why I come back and say it's still early days to say that the affordable housing decree really has to give a scorecard. I think there are other factors also which need to fall in place so that they can be able to support this decree, so that it becomes a reality. So those are some of the things that I'm emphasizing. I know it's still a work in progress. We'll continue to work that with the State Department, and hopefully at the end of the day, we'll come up with a scorecard that reflects and says that actually the decree was worth it. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think we've had a very great discussion here. Let me just ask one more question before. That's a question from our audience. So, apart from the State Department of Housing, who else can be contacted for these projects for uptake? I think this is a question from Catherine. I don't know if Ngatia want to come on there. And then there's also a question, I think that's to John. Somebody wants to know how they can join the KGBS. So for that, I will answer myself. Whoever wants to join KGBS, they just get in touch with John. John would share his email address, and then that discussion can go on. But Ngatia, can you let us know, is there someone, is there a particular focal point that developers can get in touch with for projects?
If it's in terms of buyers, then developers are not only are they using this centralized platform, but they also have their own individual marketing channels and marketing strategies and the like. So if from a buyer's perspective, it's more in line with just the typical sales process of a typical developer. But if we're looking from the developer's perspective on how they can tap into this program, then the central point is the State Department of Housing. But if you're a member of the Kenya Green Building Society, you can easily reach us through them. You can easily reach us through the Kenya Property Developers Association as well, if not directly as well. We are a very accessible State Department.
Great. And I would also want to mention that IFC, working together with KGBS, we have trained at least about 50 people 50 officials from both the Public Works Department and then the State Department for Housing to become edge experts. Because the idea is we want these officials to understand how edge works, so they can easily advise developers on how they can get their projects to be green. And we are really, like John, as you mentioned, for all of these other counties that have signed the MOU with the State Department, we are happy to work with these counties to train them as well, to get them to understand how they can truly, really get their projects to be green. And that becomes the stepping ground for them to be able to attract a lot more green funding for their project. Because like Ngatia mentioned, before you can really get access to this incentive, you should be ready, to hit the ground running, because you should be able to have the funding for the project, right? And getting these projects to be green is also one way of being able to attract some of these cheaper funds that is out there in the market, right? Thank you so much for this discussion. I think it was very, very engaging, very, very revealing, and I'm hoping it was helpful to our participants and then the audience. I'll leave the stage for Kefe to give the closing remarks. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dennis. That was a super session, very insightful, and I think it was a great deep dive into the topic, both from the housing or housing green building aspect, as well as obviously from a State Department perspective. So great discussion, and thank you to our panelists as well. It was really, really thorough, and I hope the audience also gained value. We saw a lot of questions coming through. We'll also share a link to the session as well as the presentation, so that we'll make available to all the attendees, such that you can have some key takeaways from today's program. So this brings us towards the end of the session. I just want to make another mention. Next week, we'll be hosting the EAPI Summit. It's 5 days of a virtual event, 2 days of networking where you can arrange bespoke one-on-one virtual meetings. There's a concierge service that really allows you to set a whole calendar of of meetings with some key stakeholders across the region, and 3 days of content. We've got 2 main days of agenda items and 1 day of workshops. So a lot of valuable insights, a lot of networking to be done, a lot of content which you can access both live and post the conference. So you can register for that online on our website, EAPIsummit.com. And it's a lot of value for what is being provided. So I hope everyone joins us next week. Once again, thank you to our partners on this webinar, IFC Edge. It's great to see the growth within the region and the partnership with the state government as well as the KGBS. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to Dennis, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.